Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder, here with a little bit of Star Wars lore. Before we begin though, I do want to address something that a lot of you guys have been asking me about. To those who don't know, Battle of the Dreadnoughts is a short animation that I've been working on with E.C. Henry. I initially intended to release the full video in February or January of this year. Obviously, we're in March, so I've failed. But I think for the right reasons. We want to make something really awesome for you guys, and unfortunately, that's required more work than we expected. Right now, March is pretty bad across the board for Star Wars YouTubers, or at least my videos, and to be frank, because I put some money into this project, I'm gonna wait until April to release it. However, we will have a trailer out for you guys very soon. Feel free to ask more questions on this below, but I do want to thank you guys for your patience. But on to the video. Let's talk about Palpatine, specifically Star Wars Legends Palpatine, a man obsessed with, beyond all else, beating death and living forever. Now we know Palpatine was somewhat cocky and believed the Alliance would be annihilated at the Battle of Endor. Still, it seems like he did take an unnecessary risk by actually attending the Death Star 2 personally. Sure, him being there does help goad the Alliance into battle, but if we're being honest, he probably could have done that with either a body double or just through fake leaks, like he did with the Death Star 2 generally. So why did he put himself in harm's way? That takes me to yesterday, when I was reading the preview for Tom Veitch's new Star Wars book on StarWarsInterviews.com, and I'm going to link to that site below in the description. By the way, special thanks to Dennis, who runs that site and filled me in on the news before it went live. Anyway, the excerpt largely details how both Tom, who created Dark Empire, and Timothy Zahn, who of course created the Thrawn trilogy, disagreed but also worked somewhat together while creating a reinvigorated Star Wars EU in the early 90s. Now, aside from the out-of-universe stuff, the excerpt also had a bit of in-universe lore that I thought was really interesting. So, if we go back to Return of the Jedi, we see not only Palpatine on the Death Star 2, but also specifically telling Luke to strike him down. Of course, all of this can be attributed to Sidious hoping to turn Luke to the dark side, but undoubtedly, there was a very real risk to his life. Of course, we later learned in Dark Empire that Palpatine was actually creating clones to house his spirit after the death of his physical body. Tom uses the events of Return of the Jedi to justify the clone plotline against criticism landed both by Timothy Zahn and ultimately many within the fandom. Here's the quote: "It was my thesis that in Return of the Jedi, the Emperor chose this moment to come out of his deep seclusion in the Imperial City because he no longer feared for the safety of his physical body. His mastery of the dark side had become such that he was now ready to make a transition he had been working towards for many years, namely the replacement of his aging, diseased, and crippled body with a young clone. Tempting Luke to strike him in anger with the lightsaber could thus accomplish two things. It would bring Luke over to the dark side, and it would mark the moment when Palpatine made the transition to his clone body. When thrown down the reactor shaft, the blue flashes represented the Emperor's living energy, his conscious dark force, leaving his body, and, according to our story, his consciousness was translated across the galaxy almost instantaneously, and entered a new youthful body. Using cloned bodies, Palpatine could live forever, and rule the Empire for thousands of years. So, this is not confirmed lore, but it does speak to the author's intention, which I personally think is very important. We also see, specifically from the Dark Empire sourcebook, that Palpatine very quickly transferred his spirit to a new clone body, although it did take longer than expected for him to recover his strength. He saw the fracturing of the Empire as an opportunity. The Dark Empire was a natural evolution of the Imperial regime, seeing the weak destroyed, the unfaithful routed, and a more pure, less bloated system in place. It was a chance for, and I quote, an eternal dynasty, with the descendants of Skywalker as its nobility and Palpatine as its omnipotent ruler, as he would travel across the universe, spreading the shadow of his rule, blotting at the stars themselves, and taking his dark rule to other helpless galaxies. What's more, in the 6 years where Palpatine was presumed dead, he significantly increased his force powers, as also confirmed by the sourcebook. So that's that. Tom's working theory was that Palpatine was able to reincarnate, and he personally believed that there were enough hints within the movie to justify that. His conviction was only furthered by the prequels, where Palpatine speaks several times about a desire for everlasting life. Now, full disclosure, when reading the Dark Empire sourcebook, I also found a line which questions this, specifically saying that Palpatine did not expect to die so suddenly when he was thrown down the reactor shaft, and that the journey to his clone body was actually more difficult than expected. Now, you can take the source book as more or less authoritative than the author, or you can reconcile them by saying that Palpatine simply didn't think he'd be killed in that very moment. But personally, I do think Tom's idea, though fairly self-serving, that Palpatine was no longer afraid of death does make sense. However, that's just my opinion. I really hope you guys enjoy this video, and I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. Was Palpatine ready to transfer his spirit to a new clone body? Was he willing to die at Endor, or was it all a pretty big coincidence? All of that and more down below. Also, if you have any questions you'd like me to handle next week, put them down below with the hashtag AskEck. Anyway guys, that is all for now. Until next time, this has been EckhartsLadder. May the Force be with you.